Hey everybody, John M. here with just a real quick announcement before we begin the episode this week. I recorded the introduction to this episode over a week ago because I knew I was going to have a busy week of business travel, so I wanted to get things squared away. You will hear me referencing our March 20th Sober Speak live event here in Frisco, Texas, and after much prayer and consideration, I decided to go ahead and cancel the event. This was not an easy decision by any means. I spoke with Samara earlier in this week, and we discussed it, and it seems like it is the best thing to do for all involved during these uncertain times. We don't want to be having a large gathering like that. So I just want to let you know that when you hear me referencing March 20th, Sober Speak Live, it has actually been canceled, and we will get Sumera S. rescheduled in short order, and I will have announcements about that coming up.
But what we're talking about here in the first 3 steps of recovery, those first 3 steps are preparing me to be as spiritually fit as I can possibly be for somebody who's yet to come.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. That was the voice of Mr. Jimmy D that so many of you will recognize, that you heard at the beginning of this episode, and you're going to hear so much more from him in just a moment. But first things first, this episode, the one you're listening to right here, right now, at this very moment, is brought to you by Randy. You know what Randy did? Randy went to our website, soberspeak.com. He clicked on the little yellow donate tab, and he made a contribution. Thank you so much, Mr. Randy, for your generous contribution. This, my friend, this episode is going right out to you. Now, as we have an agreement with the other listeners, we are going to let them listen on in to this episode along with us. But this episode is coming right out to you, Mr. Randy. Thank you very much. I, John M., will be the chairperson for this meeting between meetings, and I am truly, truly honored to serve all of you listening in. So you're asking, or so you want to know, John M., what in the world may be going on March 20th, 7 p.m. in the city of Frisco, Texas? Well, and I tell you that we're going to have Sober Speak Live, and it will feature Sumera S. from the Clean Air North Group here in North Texas, and we are looking so forward to seeing all of you there. For those of you who can make it, I realize that many of you cannot make it, but it will be held at the Grace Avenue United Methodist Church in Frisco, Texas on Main Street, and if you need the address and all that other stuff, go to our website, soberspeak.com. And it is right there on the landing page. We also have this in Eventbrite. For those of you who are familiar with Eventbrite and want to sign up there, if you do sign up there, you get notifications of all of our other upcoming Sober Speak Live events. All right, so we are going to get right to it today, and Mr. Jimmy D is sharing on steps 1, 2, and 3. I know many of you are going to recognize Jimmy D from several other episodes that we've had him on. During this episode, he talks about the doctor's opinion. He talks about the psychic allergy, the mental obsession. And he also talks about his upbringing as what he called a crisis Catholic. I had never heard that term before. Really enjoyed that. And he's going to share so much more. And keep in mind that I will have plenty listener feedback. That's for my Irish friends out there. Plenty listener feedback at the end of this episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, strap on your seatbelt. Enjoy the ride. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Jimmy D. Okay, so we are sitting here again today with Mr. Jimmy D. Hello, Jimmy D.
Hello.
So glad you were here. So glad to have you back. Jimmy D, for those of you who may not know it, if you're new to this podcast, has been, we had him at a Sober Speak Live event, and then we probably had him on 2 or 3 other episodes. I can't remember, but he is a fan favorite. That's a good thing. We get a lot of
That's good.
We get a lot of feedback when Jimmy D appears. So, we today are going to cover some of the basics of Alcoholics Anonymous, if you will. First of all, Jimmy, go ahead, introduce yourself, and give your sobriety date if you wish, please.
My name's Jimmy D. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been sober since August the 25th of 1997. Thankful for that.
Yeah. Me too, and I'm sure a lot of other people.
Lots of people are thankful for that.
Okay. So we are going to cover today. We're going to cover steps 1, 2, and 3 of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, Jimmy, let's just dive right into it. So, step 1 is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. What comes to mind for you?
Well, I think that at the beginning of my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous, my first sponsor introduced me to the doctor's opinion in the book. He felt like it was vitally important for me to have a reconciliation with the Alcoholics Anonymous definition of alcoholism. Not to say that we have any opinion on any other definition, but that, one of the things that I think about is I had not yet realized the depth at which I was suffering. I remember saying something somewhat a little bit flippantly, and I said, I get a sense of ease and comfort just driving to the liquor store because I know what's at the liquor store, right? I haven't even ingested yet, but always overshooting the mark. We talk about that, right? And so that doctor's opinion was important, and then we had some discussions. And later on, I think I learned that part of those discussions were not to vet me because, I'm going to be afforded my own, that's 100% my own, but I should, I think it's right when we say in Alcoholics Anonymous that perhaps that is the only step that we need to take absolutely.
And I want to back up just for a second. For those of there are a lot of people who are listening to this maybe for the first time, and they are curious regarding Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps and such. And so why don't you describe to them where in the book the doctor's opinion is and who the doctor actually is?
So the doctor's opinion is at the very beginning of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. The pages are numbered as Roman numerals to set them off. They're actually in a different type style than the actual first 164 pages of the book. It is the only part of the text that is written by a non-alcoholic, including the chapters that talk about the families of alcoholics. They were obviously written by AA members, right? And Silkworth went out on a limb for that chapter. because at the time that the book was being written in, 1939, Alcoholics Anonymous was unknown as a society, and we're not going to go too deep into that, but it was not a feather in Dr. Silkworth's cap to have anything published with his name on it. In fact, the original thoughts were that it would be just an anonymous doctor who was giving an opinion based on what he had seen in Bill, the changes that he had seen in Bill, what Dr. Silkworth terms the psychic change. But he talks about the spiritual aspect of alcoholism, the physical aspect of alcoholism, and there's something else I think I'm forgetting.
Mental
obsession. Yes, exactly.
Okay, so you wanted to understand, or your sponsor wanted you to understand the definition of alcoholism from the doctor opinion's perspective. Do I remember? Did I hear that right?
Right. So not in any way related to a genetic predisposition to alcoholism, or, the fact that, I didn't have two natural parents when I grew up, or, it was not any relation to my socioeconomic status or the job that I had or didn't have or any of that other stuff, right? I guess I would say, to be able to foster ownership, right? Because later on, I'm going to be challenged with ownership of my actions, which I'm going to find out later are really my problem. But got to know that I can't drink successfully first.
So part of that not drinking successfully is the physical allergy.
Absolutely.
So talk about the physical allergy and a little bit about what the doctor says about that.
The doctor, Dr. Silkworth, describes, and I reconcile that, and he talks about that we are fundamentally different, and that we drink essentially for the effect produced by alcohol. And absolutely, that rings true for me. I felt different when I drank, and I felt fear when I started to drink, and felt like we weren't able to finish that process. That was fear, and I felt it physically. And the men that I have had the opportunity to work with that have formed that sense of identification, they also have the same types of descriptions. My stomach felt different. My heart beat differently. It was amazing. Yeah.
So there's a physical allergy part, and then there's the mental obsession piece, which the book talks about, that differentiate us as well, kind of draw us back to that alcohol time after time. Any examples in your life by any chance of when that may have happened to you?
Well, we say we can't differentiate the true from the false, and that we can't recall with sufficient force pain and suffering, recent pain and suffering. I went to a Christmas party, considering that this is holiday time of the year that we're visiting with each other, and at a country club that I didn't belong to, but my grandmother did. And I was drunk when I got there. My biggest client for my company was hosting that Christmas party, and the chairman of the company was also the chairman of that country club that year. So you could not have lined it up any better, let's say. And so some of those people that knew me in that bank, it was a bank. Some people that knew me tried to get me over at a table in the corner because I was not behaving well, and so I got up to find my keys, and in an alcoholic stupor, and I fell flat on my head on a flagstone path right in front of the club, and they thought I'd broken my back, strapped me to a board, and took me downtown in an ambulance. And by 11 o'clock the next morning, I was drunk again. I was drunk again.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't seem to last real long. We have a tendency to forget what we went through very quickly.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on then a little bit to step number 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So to me, I guess there's two components to that. Number one is the spiritual part of that. I came to believe power greater than ourselves. And then there's the insanity piece of that on the back end, which you hear referenced in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. So why don't you tackle those two arenas, people struggling with coming to believe, and then on the back end of that, what the book means by sanity?
I would think I would start out, my own experience was contempt prior to investigation. And I was not an atheist when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I was certainly disinterested in any type of surrender to or formation of a power. Now, Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual society, not a religious society. But I would say that my sponsor did me a great favor. I was in a home group, and we had a open meeting once a week, and people dressed up. They dressed up like they used to dress up before they got sober for Saturday night. I mean, not in hoochie clothes, but they dressed up, and I thought, these people, they have no idea, right? I mean, I had material things, but I was at zero. And he said, you need to make sure you get a calendar and find out when these people tell their story. And I want you to make sure you make every effort you can to go. And then I want you to come back and I want you to tell me how they got here from there on their own. And I couldn't do it. Even when people, year of sobriety, 2 years of sobriety, I mean, some struggles, huge struggles, some high bottom drunks, we would say, very high bottom drunks, but they had found and believed most days that there was a power that they could cite that was responsible for their new way of living and thinking. And they had left just like the book, and I'm trying to insert quotes, but they're apropos. They left the drink question aside. They didn't spend a lot of time talking about how they didn't drink one day at a time. They talked about how they lived one day at a time. They talked about how they had relationships with people that they weren't even welcome in their homes before they came to Alcoholics Anonymous, because they had been consistent in thought and action, and they believed that this God of their understanding, the God of their understanding, was giving them the power to act and speak and respond in a way that was radically different from the way that they had done before. And they talked about actions that they took before they came to Alcoholics Anonymous in sobriety. In other words, they were sober when they took the actions. And some of the actions were more heinous than the things they did when they were drunk. So, yeah.
What kind of spiritual background did you have, a religious background coming in? You said you were an atheist, but how would you describe it?
I was a crisis Catholic when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's no slight to the, and sometimes, people, and I understand, I respect that sometimes people will not actually name a faith, because I certainly don't want a negative connotation between my faith of origin and my bad behavior. But I would run to the church
in a crisis.
Absolutely. And that priest would give me the most idiotic things to do. He'd say, we're going to go down on St. Paul Street and feed the homeless on Sunday. And I'd say, I just gave you big problems. I mean, work, as I phrased it, was not a solution to those problems. So what he was doing is exactly what happens, I believe, with us in Alcoholics Anonymous. Our problems pale in comparison when we're sent to be of service to the people about us. And that's exactly what he was trying to do. But I struggled. And I read the chapter We Agnostics, and I think that deserves airtime over and over and over and over again. And I was just, I wasn't told that I needed to believe in something. I was told that I needed to be willing to believe in something. And And I think that reconciles with the text of the book. God either is or God isn't. It doesn't say anything about that I recognize God. It says, is it or isn't it? And I've worked with a lot of people and known a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and the definition of what God is as broad brush topic as anything in AA.
Were you neutral or happy to hear or sad to hear that that in Alcoholics Anonymous the subject of God was going to be brought up?
No, because in my first few months of sobriety, I was in all my sobriety, but especially in the first few months, I was in a book study on Thursday night, and I think when I actually got sober, we were in the chapter We Agnostics, and so every Thursday night, I heard people talking about God and their conception of God. Now, I respect that if secular religion is your definition of your higher power, that's fine. But as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, I tried to emulate what I was shown when I was new. And that's that sometimes mentioning Jesus in an AA meeting can be as offensive as a drug addict talking about needles hanging out of their arm for 15 minutes. It's that much of an outside issue to us. And I don't say that to offend anyone. I mean, outside of my AA membership, I am not a regular participant in organized religion, but I see it with a brand new pair of eyeballs. And I was shown the love of a church, and how community participation for the greater good was food for my soul, and I rejected those concepts. But I have a newfound appreciation. I real quick, and I know we don't spend much time. I've been sober about 3 or 4 months, and a girl that I'd known all my life was getting married, and the bishop was coming because they were a big Lebanese family, and so it was going to be the Catholic wedding to end all Catholic weddings. And so I'm a guy who couldn't even sit through Saturday afternoon, and Saturday afternoon in my faith is, we call it anticipated Mass, which means you anticipate being too hungover to get up on Sunday morning. So you go on Saturday afternoon, and I could grab a missalette and wonder why nothing was changing. So again, I'm sober. I might have been October or November. I was sober 3 or 4 months, and I asked my sponsor if I could go to the wedding and the reception. And he said, well, you need to check with me between the wedding and the reception, because, I had not done well with wedding receptions before I got sober.
I hear
and
you.
And it was just a little, temperature check. And I'm not kidding you. They incensed everything. She put flowers in front of every statue in that church. It lasted at least an hour and 45 minutes. It was the longest wedding in history. And I left that church and we didn't have cell phones back then. And I went up to the Quickie Mart up at the corner, up the street from the church. I couldn't wait to get up there. And I called Greg, my sponsor, and I said, you will not believe it. You will not believe it. And he said, what is it? And I said, that church has changed. It is nothing like what it used to be. And he said, Jimmy, I'm not a member of that church, but I would safely say that the service you just observed hadn't changed marginally in 1,000 years.
Right.
Your perception has changed.
As Chuck C would call it, a new pair of glasses.
Absolutely a new pair of glasses. And, there is no revisionist history in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think that it's important for us. And, we have societies, subsets of AA members, and we respect their ability to be autonomous to a point other than changing the steps. And they can be free thinkers at whatever level they feel like they're comfortable in being free thinkers. But I'll pitch out there for those that are blatantly atheist. In other words, I'm not talking about big G-O-D, but just no higher power whatsoever. And I steal this from my sponsor, my current sponsor. He says, not believing in anything is believing in something.
That's right. Yeah, coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was more agnostic And the reason I was more agnostic is because being atheist actually took work.
Yes, exactly. I understand that.
You have
I understand
to
that.
formulate some ideas and opinions and be able to argue it and all that.
But I would hope, and I'm as structured of an AA member and probably somewhat conservative. If we looked at let's say the graph of AA membership, I'm certainly in a conservative part of the graph. But I think we need to give people a lot of room in order to develop, accept, and enlarge that spiritual consciousness. There are many things that I think we can cut corners on as we go along the journey in sobriety. With just 22 years, but having 22 years in the active and involved in the program, the one part that I don't see that can be left out in any way whatsoever is reconciliation with the spiritual aspect of the program, because it's the only aspect of the program. We don't really have anything else.
Right. Okay, so when we think about the second piece of the second step there, where it talks about the insanity piece, being restored to sanity. A lot of people struggle with that word, what it means. I'm not insane. Talk about your experience with that.
What does the book say? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I find it interesting, and I would speak to it in the first person. I bowed up a little bit, right? I bow up with the word insanity. It's a harsh word. It's a harsh word, and it's not hard to understand. It almost sounds like what it means, right? It's not something that anybody aspires to. But when I looked at just little snippets of the way that I had conducted my life, the way that I had run my life before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, it is insane to take a drink before you know that a field officer from the Dallas County Adult Probation Department is coming to visit you at your home because you're on probation for driving drunk. I mean, that's insane.
Right.
Now, I did not know at the time that I could not drink. I just wanted to calm my nerves so he didn't think something was wrong with me when he came by. I didn't realize I'd be half drunk in the hour that it took while I waited for him to come, right? I could not just have one drink. I couldn't just have one drink. And there were many, many occurrences that were along those same lines. I think the insanity of expecting that another human being would continue to tolerate my behavior and treat me with any degree of respect or kindness. Now, they loved me just like they loved you, because they loved us unconditionally to a certain degree. But that love turns on them, and it makes them just as sick as we are. And I really did believe and expect that people were treating me harshly, even after I came in. For example, today, I'm a guest in your home, and I don't have to have any kind of a card or a cheat sheet to tell me what is generally acceptable behavior, regardless of whose home you might come into. There are children in this home. And before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, beyond my control, I could have shown up at your doorstep in a way that was absolutely unacceptable and said and done things that were beyond inappropriate.
You have behaved very well today, Mr. Jimmy D.
Let's get that. Don't cut that part. Keep that on the record. But the insanity aspect, I know people get really stuck, and so if we just listen to our stories, that's really, I think, one of the reasons that the book asks us to share in a general way what we were like, is to give tangible examples of how a guy like me in my cups that unpredictable behavior is such that the actions that I take sometimes they're insane. There's a reason why we're put in psychiatric wards before they figure out whether or not we're alcoholic.
That's right.
I mean, that's where we get collected. You go to the psych ward, and rightly so, because I'm not of my own mind. Yeah.
We will be continuing our conversation with Mr. Jimmy D in just a moment. Just a reminder, you are listening to Sober Speak. You can find us on the web at soberspeak.com. And there you will find 100 plus other episodes that you can listen to for free. You can also find the donate button on our website. If and only if the Spirit moves you to use it, you can do such. Please keep in mind this is a podcast funded by you, the listener. Sober Speak is a self-supporting organization through our own contributions. We are not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. We do not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorse nor oppose any causes. All right, now back to Mr. Jimmy D. All right. So let's talk then a little bit about the third step. And I almost forgot it there. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of this God as we understood him. And as you know, they put that as we understood him in there. And it was either a stroke of genius or just God inspired, however you want to look at it. But it has done wonderful things for our society.
Well, a result of the first group consciences of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sidebar deal. But the as we understand him part was because even with our fledgling membership, Bill said 100, there might have been 70 sober people in AA. Fighting between Akron and New York about the manuscript for the book. And, we had Fitz, who was, his story's in the book, our Southern friend. He's the one in the text of the book. Who are you to say there is no God? Minister's son. And then we had another guy who did not stay sober continually till death. But we had another guy who said, it's unacceptable. This on your knees stuff, this God period stuff is not reconcilable with all of our experiences. We've had spiritual experiences of the educational variety. And so the modification of the step was in line with modification of other parts of the text. At least that's the story that I've always heard. And thank goodness that we have that as we understand him. And we knew that we needed to be a book or a text or a society that could have could be used by people of many faiths or no faith at all. The topic of Alcoholics Anonymous was shopped in the faith of my birth because to make sure that Catholics would not have fundamental objections because they did not believe that Catholics should be excluded from membership in AA or active participation in AA. So I've cheated and opened the book because it talks about what? Selfishness and self-centeredness. That's the root of our trouble. So it's telling me already early on, this is the third step. And we've already moved on from talking about whether or not I take a drink. Because it's ready at that point, at the third step, when when I've thought well, the book says. I thought well before I took the step. Not a single other step in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, talks about thinking well before taking it.
Hadn't thought about that.
So I've really considered, because the first 70-odd people thought, boy, this is a cornerstone of recovery. Right? We've left our problem. We know we have it. I identify that I have this thing that human beings cannot intercede on my behalf. I've asked them to. They've tried to without me asking, and it still hadn't worked.
You're beyond human aid.
I'm beyond human aid. And then we get that part that, at least in our part of the AA world, we read every single AA meeting. We read the first part of chapter 5. And then right after that, it says, being convinced of all that stuff, everything we read, right? And then the chant, chant, chant. God couldn't what if he were sought, right? I'd rather listen than chant in my world. Thank you very much. Sidebar deal, right? But then it says, being convinced, we were at step 3. What does that mean? Selfishness and self-centeredness. It says, any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And when I read that for the very first time, and when I read that for the 10,000th time, I see over and over again, not that I don't need to take actions, but I need to take actions based on where I think I can be of maximum service to God and the people about me. And I have to prayerfully consider what those actions are. And the book says something. It says, when we sincerely took that position, all sorts of remarkable things followed.
Okay, so when we sincerely took what position?
The position of surrendering to a power and continuing to surrender. You know, the old man from California, sage old bird, will say that the third step is when I really got into that, I threw my towel into the ring, right? I surrendered. And every single day since that day, I've been taking little bitty bits of that towel back, right?
That's Clancy, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Good old man, right? Some people love him, some people hate him, and he likes both. But that's I think it's a legitimate analogy, right? I take that step as absolutely as I possibly can at the time that I'm quote unquote formally introduced. I said the prayer with my sponsor, my spiritual advisor, and I have had this, you know, yin and yang back and forth with the degree at which I surrender things ever since.
So do you remember actually taking that first
absolutely.
step? Okay, tell me about that experience.
4 months, I guess, or 4 or 5 months in the program. Not that the timeline, necessarily means anything, but it was this time of year, 1997, and we had a big meeting on that book study on Thursday night. My original home group's big meeting, big for us, 60 or 70 people. And everybody, lots of people had early commitments. So it was about, I showed up maybe 30 minutes before the meeting started. And so my sponsor had not made an appointment with me, but he asked me if I had hit my knees that morning and asked God for a day of sobriety. That had been my direction from the time I got sober. And I told him I had taken that action. He said, "Do you think that action's making any difference?" And I said, "Well, I haven't thought about drinking all day today." And he carried me over to the corner of the room, and he popped open his book, and he said, "We're going to make this commitment and take this step together." And he read the prayer. I didn't read it. And at first blush, I thought, oh, my God, I'm going to kneel in this room with 15 or 20 people all milling around here and there. And he did it, and I was afraid to say I wouldn't do it. So I did it as well, and I realized something else fairly profound for me at the time. And that's that members of Alcoholics Anonymous are so self-centered, even in sobriety, that nobody even knew. Nobody in that room even knew that we were over there kneeling in the corner of the room that cared less about any of that stuff. I've taken this prayer in a parking lot at Denny's on Central Expressway. I don't think it matters anywhere, everywhere about what you do, where you do it, but how much commitment you have behind it.
Do you remember coming out of that having any sort of different feeling, or was it just now you knew, okay, it was time to do some more work?
I knew it was time to do work. I mean, the assignment came, almost immediately, right, to begin the process of the inventory. And I think that's by design, because, I did feel good about the fact that I didn't feel like I was smoke and mirroring the deal. When I said, when I knelt with him and he said that prayer, I had seen the results of surrender with members of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd seen the power of the presence of God as they understood God with skin on it. And that was really important. And fifth tradition aside, isn't that really why we have meetings anyway? Why in the world are we continuing to create thousands upon thousands upon thousands of meetings where our topics seem to be selfish topics?
Explain that a little bit more.
I think we gather together in Alcoholics Anonymous in order to show the new man or the new woman that we have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I think that's a charge that is an unspoken charge. It doesn't need to be part of the format of or the opening of the meeting. That to the best of my ability, I need to approach a room where 2 or 3 alcoholics are gathered together for sobriety and bring solution. Because I have no idea how many people are in there that have not been offered anything like what we've been offered. And so the problems of the day, and in 22 years, I've had a lot of problems of a magnitude that I would have probably blown out of proportion, but they were certainly big problems. So if I come into a room of Alcoholics Anonymous and I say, my wife left me today, or I lost my job today, or I had a wreck and somebody died in the wreck, or my grandmother died, which she did the day, I was in an AA meeting that night, and my grandmother died today. But when I said my grandmother died today and she raised me and she's the only parent I've had for all of these years, I remembered what those people shared with me when I was new. And there were ellipses after my comment, not an exclamation point. And I said, but God will do for me what I cannot do for myself. And I'm here to see if I can do something for somebody else. And I got better. I, of course, was benefited. Whether anyone else was benefited or not, I have absolutely no idea. But if I had left that room with a period at the end of my statement, I would have felt worse when I left than I did when I came. It's a completely different approach to, I think, why we do what we do. Our society perhaps has been indirectly influenced by forces outside of our society, and are a lot of people who unknowingly come to Alcoholics Anonymous as if we are a self-help program, and we're not a self-help program. By definition, we are not that. Now, if we need to be, we need to create some literature to back that up. But what we're talking about here in the first 3 steps of recovery, those first 3 steps are preparing me to be as spiritually fit as I can possibly be for somebody who's yet to come.
Love it, Jimmy. All right. Anything else you want to say about steps 1, 2, 3?
I probably really said enough now.
No, you're good. But that's why I have the podcast, right? Because I've been able to have, lunch and dinner and talk to people like you after meetings. And, I want to keep it kind of based on the 12 steps, the podcast as a whole. But I also want to let people hear kind of, I guess you would, some of the conversations that go on behind the scenes and what people think, and this is not a meeting to where I'm going to be concerned about you cross-talking or whatever. And you can actually get some of your ideas out there.
Right. And I don't, there's no requirement for, I guess what we would say would be political correctness, but just as with you, I get around to a lot of places. And there are reasons why we see what we would consider to be huge AA groups in our city who celebrate from 1 to 5 years of sobriety, maybe 3 or 4 people for each one of those years. And then when we go from 6 to 10, we see maybe 2 at each one of those years, 6 to 10. And then when you get up to 11 and over 11, which is really not a long time to be sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, we may have 1 at 12 and 1 at 15, and then we shoot on up to 25 or 30 or 35 years of sobriety. And frankly, I think people get bored. And the reason they get bored is I don't know that they've ever really prayerfully considered the basic purpose of the fellowship to which we all belong. And we're charged with trying to the best of our ability to help the still suffering alcoholic.
And that's what we're trying to do here today, aren't we?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Jimmy, for coming in. I sure do appreciate it. God bless you. I'm going to read page 164 of the Big Book to close us out. And it says, Abandon yourself to God as you understand God, much like we were talking about earlier. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. And you will surely meet some of us, like me and Mr. Jimmy, as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Do you have something you want to read there? I just see you looking at the book.
No. I just wanted to read along with you. And isn't it interesting because the writing of the book was so fractured. There was no element of a common theme in the text of the book. And you just read the last paragraph of the entire text, and it reconciles perfectly with what we've been talking about in the first 3 steps.
As it should.
Yeah.
All right. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Was a pleasure. If you need to get in touch with Jimmy D, and or you have any comments regarding Jimmy D or any of the other speakers that we bring on here, feel free to reach out to me at johnjohn@soberspeak.com, and I will hook you up appropriately. And if you are not in the super secret Facebook group and you would like to be part of that Facebook group, please send me your email associated with your Facebook account. That's the tricky part that people sometimes do not pay attention to, but you need to pay attention. I need the email associated with the Facebook group. If you want to join that, send me your email to johnjohn@soberspeak.com. And if you are not following us on the Instagram, well, I would highly suggest you do that. Miss Cassandra has many amazing posts in that group, on that platform, I should say. And we're at SoberSpeak, all one word. Now, on to a little bit of listener feedback from you, the listener. Now, that makes sense, doesn't it? Yes, listener feedback. Where else would listener feedback come from? Of course, it's going to be from you, the listener. Mark writes in, and he is from Gamblers Anonymous. And he said, "Hey, John, I'm a compulsive gambler and I attend GA, but I need more than that. So also giving your podcast a try to understand the steps better. Thanks." Well, that is great, Mark. I am glad that we can serve as a supplement to your program in GA. Now, when I first saw that GA, I thought he attends Georgia. But then I read a little closer and I figured out what it was. But thank you very much, Mark, for writing in, and I'm glad we can be a part of your journey. Suzanne writes in, and Suzanne says, "Hi, John. Just touching base. Excuse me, folks. Excuse-moi." She says, "Hi, John. Just touching base to say how much I enjoy your podcast. I enjoyed listening to episode number 125 with Renee E. I've never read or can't remember reading The Keys to the Kingdom before, but now, wow, that was amazing. It's going in my phone notes as a go-to reading when I need to get out of myself. I even shared it with a sponsee and passed the message along. Just wanted to tell you how grateful I am for SoberSpeak serving as my meeting between meetings. Thanks for all you do, Suzanne." Well, thank you, Suzanne. And I passed along your message to Miss Renee E. That's episode number 125. If you guys hadn't listened to it, it's absolutely fantastic. And it's called, what's this called? Oh, AA is my God with skin on. Randy writes in, and Randy says, "Hey, John, my name is Randy C. Because God, my higher power, has a sense of humor, my sobriety date is 4/1/2017, April Fool's Day. My home group is at 6:15 a.m. in the morning at the hub in the Plains in Lubbock, Texas. I got married last September and now I live in Crane, Texas, a small West Texas town south of Odessa. The move and decision to get married have proven to be a true blessing. However, Crane only has one AA meeting per week, and I miss my daily 6:15 a.m. meetings. 2 exclamation points. SoberSpeak has truly been a godsend for me. I am able to listen to your podcast and keep my recovery bucket full between our weekly meetings. Thank you for providing, I think is what you mean, providing a voice for recovery out here in the oil patch, double exclamation point. Respectfully, Randy C. Well, I'm glad that we can provide you some meeting between meetings there, Randy. And I know what that's like to move away from a home group that you truly enjoyed for a significant period of time. And anyway, keep us posted out there in the oil patch. Say hello to everyone out there in the oil patch for us, all right? Carmel writes in from New Zealand, and she says, "Hi, John." By the way, I have to tell this story. If you're from New Zealand, so you folks know, you're actually known as a Kiwi. And I was watching, actually my wife was watching this show last week called Naked and Afraid. It's on the Discovery Channel. If you're here in America, you know, most people will know what Discovery Channel is. And we were watching that. Those were these people. Okay. So there's nothing pornographic about it, right? They take these people, and they throw them out into the wilderness, like in the Amazon or something like that. And they have to stay out there for like 21 days, and they're naked when they go out there. Now, why they put the naked part, I have no idea in there. I guess it's just to get viewers, but anyway, they throw them out there in the wilderness, and they have to survive in the wilderness for 21 days. And there are these 2 women on Naked and Afraid that are absolutely incredible. And I heard my wife talking about it, and I said, man, they really know a lot of stuff. I wonder how they learned all that stuff. And she said, they're Kiwis. And she said, aren't Kiwis from New Zealand? And I said, well, if you would listen to my podcast, my dear wife, you would know that Kiwis are indeed from New Zealand. It seems like we've talked about it every week lately, but nonetheless, that came up in a topic of conversation in our home. Anyway, back to the letter. Hello from New Zealand. I've been listening to your podcast now for about 6 weeks, and everything I've listened to has been amazing, inspiring, and so helpful. Well, maybe up to this point, I don't know how helpful or inspiring I'm being with that story, but nonetheless, she says, I've been having a pretty rough time lately, mental pain in my early sobriety. And it's so hard. I'm in early sobriety. I'm so sorry. And it's so hard. It is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. You know, they say that first year is like 10 years. Anyway, she says, I have relapsed twice since coming to AA last year. The first time is 69 days, and the second time is 59 days. I'm currently 27 days, and I hope to never drink again. I can relate, Miss Carmel. I had been in and out of AA for several years myself, kept picking up a ton of Desire chips, and there are a ton of people out there listening right now who can relate to that. Anyway, she says, this time around, I have a much deeper connection to my higher power, and I am praying every day, starting with handing my life and my will over to God. Previously, when times were hard, I thought that God had abandoned me. I felt alone, and I was filled with self-hate and despair, and all I could see and feel was darkness. Man, I can relate to that feeling. I know that feeling. Through God, I have now found hope. Hope is giving me strength and helps me endure my mental pain. I hope that sobriety will take me to a happier and more content place in my life. I have an awesome home group, and I am proud to be part of it. They are some of the best people I have ever met. I also have a fantastic sponsor. Thank you so much for bringing us SoberSpeak. You are literally saving lives, triple exclamation point. Oh, thank you. Oh gosh, I don't even know what to say to that. Your enthusiasm and happiness makes me smile. Well, thank you. Your laugh makes me laugh. Well, thank you. I guess that's good. Your guest speakers are such incredible guides for me on this challenging journey, much like Mr. Jimmy D and all the other people that I bring in here. That I added that last part. She says, thank you for your service. Big smiley face with clapping hands emoji. I think that's what that is. Best wishes to you and your family. Big praying hands twice. Carmel G. P.S. Thanks for hooking me up to the secret Facebook group. It's an invaluable resource. Well, you're quite welcome. And give all the Kiwis over there in New Zealand my best. Olivia writes in, hi, John. She says, my name is Olivia, and I found your site from a friend. I subscribed to your site to hear speakers. I live in Palms, California, and I am a member of the Pacific Group. I've been sober for 39 years, got sober in Orange County. My email address, I asked her about her email address because it was, I don't want to say what her email address is here, but I asked her about it because it was a unique email address, and she said those were her cats who had passed over the Rainbow Bridge. Olivia, I'm sorry to hear that, Olivia. But I'm glad you have a way of remembering them. And Pacific Group, the famous Pacific Group. Anyway, so many people know about it. Tell Mr. Clancy I said hello, even though he has no idea who I am. But thank you for writing in, Olivia, and congratulations on your 39 years. Absolutely fantastic. Karen writes in. She said, hi, John. Thank you for the podcast. They are educational, inspirational, and funny. Good on you for making them light as well as heavy. Well, we try. Can you add me to the Facebook group? I'm guessing it's private. And here is my Facebook account. Actually, I need your Facebook email, but we got you in there. She says, cheers, Karen S. and a big praying hands, big smiley face, and a big thumbs up. Well, thank you, Miss Karen. Thanks for writing in. Dwayne writes in, and Dwayne says, John, as always, thank you for Sober Speak, my meeting between meetings. I wanted to let you know how much of an impact Renee E's message, this is the one we were just talking about a second ago, I think it's episode 125, AA is my God with skin on, he says, had on me, and hope you can pass on the words to her. By the way, I did. In addition to the amazing quote, the rules apply to me also from George Clark, which really struck a nerve, I had a sincere moment of clarity listening to Renee discussing George's death. A few months before I stopped drinking, my best friend and best drinking buddy, Mike, died suddenly of a pulmonary embolism in his mid-40s, leaving behind his wife and 5 young children. His death shattered me. I descended into my own disease to try to escape the hard reality of it, and it damn near took my life. Listening to Renee talk about processing her grief, her advice on how to deal with the death, and of a close loved one, while sober, deeply resonated with me. Her message from George, i.e., tough crap, kids, suck it up, and don't be a wimp. And you don't have to like it, but you have to do it. Hit me with a simple force of logic. It was as if my best friend Mike was saying to me. Listening to Sober Speak, I came to the realization of just how close I came to giving up out of grief and alcoholic desperation. While drinking and mourning Mike's death, I am pretty sure that if I had been handed the ability to end it all right then, I would have done so with no hesitation, mindless of the suffering of my own wife and daughter. Today, through Alcoholics Anonymous, I am so very grateful to have a set of spiritual tools to help me no matter what is thrown at me. Grief can be borne with dignity and resolve, as Renee did. Please thank her so very much for sharing her story with us. It helped me immensely. While I know that healing is going to take time, I know it will come. Renee reminded me of that. Dwayne M. Well, like I said, Dwayne, I passed that message on to her, and she was very appreciative. Todd writes in. Todd with 1D, for what it's worth. I don't know if I really needed to say that, but nonetheless. Hi, John. As you know, I love your podcast. Your message is heaven sent, big smiley face. Well, Mr. Todd, from my perspective, you are heaven sent. And he says, I am coming up on a year sober again, but I have been in and out around I have been in and out and around AA since 1982. Anyways, I have about 100 AA friends here in Rapid City, South Dakota, and I wanted you to know I'm on a mission to tell all, in big cap words and underline about your podcast, sir. I hope some of them contact you. Well, I hope they do too, Todd, with 1D. Sending you and yours well wishes from the Black Hills of South Dakota. Say hi if you were ever in this beautiful area. Have a blessed day, John. Todd. With 1D. I'm adding the 1D part. You know, Todd, this is very interesting. I have, since I've been sober, I have traveled extensively by the grace of God, and most of it for business and work. And there are 3 states within the United States I have not been to. Alaska is one of them. And then the other 2 are South Dakota and Montana. And I have got to check at least South Dakota and Montana off my list. And I would love to get to the Black Hills of South Dakota, sir. And thank you for your invite. I'll let you know if I get up that way. Karina writes in, and she says, John, I'm not sure how I found your podcast, but this is my first time listening to any podcast. And I am here listening to Sober Speak, and I am so grateful that I found it. I started listening at episode 118 and have been current since then. And let me tell you that episode 121 and 122 have been my favorites. Well, here you go with Renee again. I really enjoyed listening to Renee's story, and I haven't really met a lot of women or ever heard of a lot of women in recovery for alcoholism or even going to AA. Well, listen to this podcast a little bit more, Miss Karina. You'll find plenty. I haven't felt that I had someone I could relate to, and it was Renee for me. Well, I'm so glad. I am new to sobriety 63 days in, and decided to make the choice after some really bad stuff. That's usually the case with most of us, Karina, started happening to me. Of course, alcohol was behind all my poor decision making. I always wanted to quit, and it was my New Year's resolution almost every year for the past maybe like 10 years, but like always, I didn't stop. Like Renee mentioned, I would change my mind on drinking to, quote, cut back, but it was all the same. And I am an alcoholic, and because my alcoholism didn't look like the others, I was okay. Well, I wasn't okay, and I wasn't until I read the first of the 12 steps. We admitted we were wrong. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And that's exactly what was going on. So every day I take my step. I go to AA and I reflect on the 12 steps. I listen to your podcast and I try my best for me, for my family, and for everyone that's watching me that might be questioning their own alcohol intake. If I can do maybe, then they can do it. If I can do it, then maybe they can do it. That's what this is all about, sharing experience, strength, and hope. So thank you, John, for this podcast, and thank you for how you are. I appreciate it. Well, Miss Karina, right back at you. Thank you for how you are, and thank you for your feedback. So much appreciated. All right, everybody. That is another week of Sober Speak. I hope to see all of you again next week. As I always say, 1 week at a time. God bless you. I love you. Thanks for all the feedback. It's what keeps me going. Until then, adios.